going on that note, okay, as parents, like, do you guys like find it hard sometimes, like your kid, like you need to discipline them, but like do something kind of funny, and so like one parent is like trying to be stern, the other one's like, and then you're like trying not to lose it. Okay, I'm the only one. Okay, I get it, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. The kids are they're tough sometimes, but they are also a lot of fun. Um, when they're fun. When they're not, they're the opposite of fun, obviously. And so today we're going to talk about fathers. I get the privilege of being able to speak from experience on being a father, and living life with two kids. Some of you guys are more experienced because you chose to have more than two kids, and bless your heart for doing that, because two is a handful sometimes. Yeah, bless your heart, Shane Craig. Like, keep going. Not more kids unless you want more kids, but keep going. Being great parents that you are. So, talking about Father's Day, right? What comes to mind? I mean, this is the typical generic question that you guys get every year. What comes to mind when you think about fathers or father figures, right? I showed 2 videos about what dads don't say, right? Like when it comes to mine, sometimes the thermostat comes to mind because my dad, before he had a programmable thermostat, he had a dial one. Maybe you guys still have the dial one, but when we were younger and it was winter and we were cold, what we'd do is we crank that dial to the very end, and then we would take blankets and put them over the heat registers, and we would lie under the blankets. Woo! Raise the bill, all right? And my dad never really said not to do that. He would just come down and turn the thermostat down. But now, as a parent myself, my kids can't reach the thermostat at the moment. But in my mind, I'd be like, what are you doing? Don't you know that costs money, right? So what comes to mind for you guys? Maybe it's fishing. Liam and Oliver's grandpa Tim, loves to go fishing, and he is determined to get them into that sport. And so this summer, apparently Tisdale has stocked fish in their pond, and he's going to take them fishing. So maybe fishing is one of the things that comes to mind. Or maybe it's another sport like golf or baseball or football, or right now maybe it's soccer because of the World Cup. Maybe it's cars. Maybe your dad or someone that you know is really good at working on cars. Or maybe they're not good at it, they're just forced to make it seem like they can work on it. Maybe it's on that line, maybe it's repairing something, right? Whenever I have an issue, I turn to my dad and going, how do you do this? And sometimes he's like, I have no idea, let's YouTube it together and see what happens. Which is really funny because my dad obviously is older, and like he didn't grow up on YouTube, but he's realizing that YouTube has how-to videos. And the amount of times that he's gone to YouTube now to fix something is astronomical, which makes me think before they had YouTube, they had those books for dummies. They had sections of those, apparently, about how to fix a computer for dummies, how to fix a car for dummies. I'm pretty much how to fix something for dummies, but I use YouTube. Maybe when you think of your dad or a father figure, you think of tools. How many of you guys have a shed full of tools that you haven't touched in years? Maybe you have more than enough tools to go around. Once again, not to harp on my father-in-law, Tim, but whenever he can't find a tool, he goes and buys one. And then he comes home and he goes, oh, there it is. And so I got an angle grinder because he had 5 of them. All right? So, I mean, bonus for me, yay, but maybe you guys, maybe wives, you're like, please stop buying tools, stop buying. We have more than enough. On that line, maybe you think of mowing. Have you guys ever seen like Dad's perfectionist lawn, right? You got to go on an angle to make those nice lines. Then you got to whippersnip the edges to make it nice and clean. I'm not that person, by the way. I'm just mow it and get it done. If it's cut, that's fine. But that's kind of these things that come to mind when we think of our fathers, right? And a lot of it is repairing. A lot of it is taking care of the house, taking care of the kids. It's working. These are things that kind of come to mind. When I was younger, I grew up in the town called Cupar, Saskatchewan. And if you guys don't know where that is about 25 minutes east of Southie, Saskatchewan. So if you were driving to Regina, you pass Southie on Highway 5 there, and you just turn east and go to Cupar. It's a very small town, but my dad got a job there, and we moved there from Saskatoon. And in the warmer months, in the summer, my dad would work, and we knew that he would get home around 4 o'clock, and we'd immediately start to berate him, going, Dad, you're home. Let's go to the park. And now I kind of get where he's coming from when he's like, just give me a minute. Because I can come home from work, and the boys instantly like, Dad, play with me. Dad, let's go outside. Dad, let's do this. Dad. And for a moment, I just go, let me breathe, please. But my dad never showed that, interestingly enough. I think he kept it inside his head all the more, or he talked to my mom about it. But he would say, Kate, let's go to the park. And we were more than capable of going to the park by ourselves, but when Dad came, it was so much more fun. And so Dad would come to the park and be like, Dad, take the soccer ball and kick it. And we were thinking a little punt, but no, he would boot it into the stratosphere. I mean, maybe looking back, as an adult, maybe it wasn't the stratosphere, but as a kid, you're like, whoa, I'm going to hit that with my head. And then your dad's like, no, don't do that, right? But he would do that. Or we would go on, when we were younger, we had the metal merry-go-rounds. And what we would do, we'd safety belt ourselves. We'd wrap our arms and our legs around the bar on the inside, and we'd go, Dad, spin us. And Dad was different than my mom because he didn't care how fast or if you got hurt. And so he would whip that merry-go-round as fast, like Mach 1, it felt like, and we'd start to slip, right? And we're like, Dad, we're going to fall. And then, boom, we're off, right? And then he's like, oh, are you okay? And he's trying not to laugh, right? Okay, well, he has to make sure that you're okay, right? You're not crying, you're not missing a limb or something's broken, right? But he's like, that was awesome! You want to do it again, right? Kind of thing. Or he would go on the swings. And interesting, the town we lived in, they were resourceful. I don't want to say cheap. They were resourceful. They took old tires and made swings out of them, but they were like bucket swings because they were tires. And so we would just crate ourselves in, and he would underduck us to the moon, and we would love it, right? These are the moments and the memories that I have of my dad. My dad felt like the superhero to us because, one, he could boot the soccer ball in the stratosphere, he could push us Mach 1, and he could underduck us to the moon. We couldn't do that ourselves, and so Dad was the strongest person that we know. My dad also had knowledge on building before YouTube. Obviously, he had the books. But one day we went and we looked into our tree in our yard, and he said, hey, talking to my brother, going, we should build a tree house, right? And with the knowledge of a 5-year-old, I had the grandest plan ever of making this the greatest tree house ever built. And so I took a 2-foot by 2-foot piece of plywood and going, this is the base of our tree house. And so I would place it, and the trees kind of curve off in different ways, and so I was going to place it in the middle as a floorboard, but I could not get a nail in to save my life. And so it kind of just hung in there, and you think you got a nail into the tree, but the nail obviously is like off, not in a tree, and it's shaky as all get out, right? And then and then we would climb in the tree and sit on this silly thing. And then my dad would go, whoa, good job, not safe, let me help you. And so he would walk into the garage and he'd come out with 2x4s. And we had no idea what a 2x4 even did. But he would take it and he would bring out a power drill, right? And he would take anchor screws and he would anchor these 2x4s into the tree, sturdy as anything else you've ever seen. My dad knew how to make a frame of a house, right? And instead of finding any scrap he could find, he found the right tools, the right wood, the right hardware to make us a tree house because he had the knowledge to do it. And to this day, my dad still has the tools that I need. I remember when we were in Wainwright, we were putting the floor into our basement, and we needed a nail gun. And I asked around in Wainwright, asking people if they had a nail gun and an air compressor, and no one had it that I knew. And my dad was 6 hours away at this point. I'm like, Dad, do you have a nail gun and a compressor? He says, I do not, but I know how to get one. And I was like, that's not what I was asking. But he went out and he got a compressor and a nail gun, and he sent it up to us. Dad was always there for us. Now, there is one tool in our arsenal that men sometimes like to use all the time, and sometimes not so much. It's just a suggestion. But that tool is our measuring tape, right? You guys have all measuring tapes of all sizes in your house, and I'm sure, right? When we use a measuring tape, Our final product seems to come out straighter or more center. When we use a measuring tape, we avoid nasty surprises like the fridge not fitting through the door, right? Or a dresser not fitting in a place just snugly nice. And the list can go on and on, the importance of a measuring tape. The thing is, when we need a measuring tape, we can't seem to find one. And when we don't need one, we find 7 of them. It's the whole idea of, I got to get another measuring tape. But measuring tape, although it seems to be one of the least, I guess, expensive tools in your arsenal, seems to be one of the most important tools that you'll have. And if I could transition just a little bit into a biblical moment, the question then transcends to you guys, how do you measure your life? Obviously, we can't just pull a tape measure and run it down year after year and go, that's how I measure my life. I walked, 17 kilometers this month, or I grew this much, which you absolutely can, but how does that measure the worth in your life? Because life is full of measurements all over. Like I just said, your height is always going to be something. Our kids are always asking, am I tall enough? How much did I grow? And so you measure them. And maybe as you get older, maybe you have to use a measuring tape around your waist to make sure you have the right pants. I've never used a measuring tape around my waist up until these last few years. And it's a humbling experience, I'll tell you that much. You don't want to use that. But we use other things to measure, right? Grades and scores that measure how smart we are, right? We use our measurement of income and net worth to see how successful we are. Sometimes wins and losses are our measurement. And so through these measurements, how do we go, I've made it in life? How do you measure the successes? And I think sometimes we place unrealistic expectations on our lives to justify that we've made it or that we've arrived, right? When we think that we've made it, we've hit a measure of success when we have our own house. But by that standard, I've failed because I've sold my house and now I'm renting. So by that measure, am I unsuccessful, right? Maybe you think you've arrived or you have a measure of success when you have a family. I've hit a milestone, I have a family, I'm succeeding. Or when you have a job or a good job and you're making a paycheck more than minimum wage and you're going, I've made it. And then you have money in the bank that you're saving up and you're going, I'm really making it now that I have money in the bank and I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. Or maybe you think you've made it in the measure of your status with your peers or your community. Right? When people know your name, you walk down the street, you go, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh man, you're so great. I'm so glad you're in this community. Maybe you've made it that way. Or maybe you've made it when people say, hey, you should run for mayor. Maybe that's the epitome of making it. Maybe making it is when you can take vacations and have the money to do that. That's our measuring tape for our life. And whether you want to agree with it or not, we kind of do that subconsciously. There are measurements that we compare ourselves to whether we make it or not. And I know that a lot of Father's Day messages that churches preach, it's a lot of like, do better, do good, follow this standard. You need to raise your kids to be the best kids that ever. But what happens if your kids are not the best kids ever? Did you fail? What standards are you following? And so I want to look at Psalms chapter 127, verses 1 and 2. Now, this entire chapter is just 5 verses, but I want to focus on the 2 first verses. And this is what it says. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. The key verses of us is, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. To clump it together without God in our life, without God at the center of all that we do, it's fruitless. It's useless toil. Although to the world it seems like you're doing really good, but without God behind it, the measurement is going to be off. Because to be honest, some of you guys get up at the crack of dawn. Some of you guys get up at an hour that the sun has not even decided to be up. And then some of you guys stay up the entire day until the sun decided to go to sleep, and you're still up and moving. So can you imagine, like, you guys do all of this work, and then you read this verse, and it says, unless you have God in it, it's useless to what you're doing. Your toil is useless. And that's kind of a hard-hitting thing to your face. Because you're like, I'm trying to work my best. I'm trying to provide for my family. Because what if doing all of this, you lay your head on the pillow at night and you go, what is this all for? Why am I working this hard and this long? What is the point? Is my goal as a father just to get up and go to bed, get up, do the work, then go to bed, and then repeat, rinse and repeat over and over just to get a paycheck so my family can have money? That seems like, yes, that seems like part of it, but that seems like a pretty uninspiring movement in a father's life. And I think that there is a lie that we tend to believe is that when we get older, we become less dependent on God because we're adults, right? I have a family of my own now. You know, I have to do my own house repairs. I have to fix my car. I have to mow my own lawn. All this stuff. You're going, I have to do this now. I can't rely on my dad anymore to do all of this stuff. And I think we kind of put that onto the association of God at this point, that God, I'm older, I guess I don't need you anymore. And I have this quote on this next slide here. And it's actually, we need to become more dependent. Because as it says in this quote, to read this properly, it says, as we mature in faith, we don't go from dependence to independence, but rather the opposite. Grace works to make independent people willing to be more dependent on God. It feels almost that I actually have to have more of God as I get older. Because the more I get older, the more I realize that I'm the adult in this situation. I can't just point it to someone else. Have you guys ever gone into a situation and you're looking for the adult in the room, and then you realize the adult is you, and you have to make the real decisions? And I don't think that ever goes away. Right? Like I'm 36 at this point, and I still feel like I'm dependent on the adults in the room. And I think that's kind of how we almost have to feel with God, is that, yes, we're older, yes, we're growing, yes, we're doing all these things, but it doesn't mean that God becomes less in our lives. And if God is less in our lives, then our measurement is off. Then our house is going to be crooked. Because working long hours without God, as this psalm says, is pointless. Human efforts like building a house or guarding a city only succeed if God is in it. Yeah, you can force your way through and make things really great, but then you leave more weary, and you leave maybe disappointed. Maybe you leave anxious rather than peaceful in rest. Because what if we're going day by day without prayer? You guys ever done that? I have. Is it good? No, but I think I can go a day without it. And then that day turns into 2. And then by the end of 4 days, I realize, wow, something is really off with me. I feel, well, like the world is crushing me. That the world is heavy. That I'm not comparing well to what people may have a standard on me. Right? Our measurement stick turns from God also into the world. Right? And I'm not saying this to belittle you, because I very much do that. Elisa can tell when I've been measuring myself to the world. Because the things that God has called me to do don't seem as important, or I don't feel like I am capable of doing it. And if we're not doing prayer, right, if our measurement is on the world and not on God, are we going day by day without talking to our kids about the Bible? Right? We feel like the church can do that. The church is not with your kids 6 days out of the week. Are we going day by day without loving our wife as Christ loves the church? Right? There's a measurement that has been placed for us, that we love, that Jesus loves us and he loves the church, and the way that he loves us, we then give back to our wives. Are we wondering why things are not changing when we refuse to sacrifice what God is asking us to lay down at his feet? Because that doesn't feel like the measurement that I need to watch. Building our house, building our family around the measurement of God and Scripture is where we need to be looking, right? Not the next big thing to fill our home, not the next big thing to fill the void, right? Not the next big thing to show that, if I buy this, I'm showing my family that I love you. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with spoiling your wife, right? Or being nice to your kids every once in a while, but that should not be the measurement of how love is shown in the house. Right? The Bible has these standards, these measurements, right? In Deuteronomy chapter 6, I believe it's chapter 6, when Moses is telling Israel, he's going, when you wake up, you talk to your kids about Christ. When you lie down, you talk about Christ. When you're walking to school, when you're walking to work, you're talking about Christ to your kids. You're constantly influencing them about who Jesus is in all of your talks, in every aspect of your life. And I love that measurement. Am I doing it faithfully? No. Do I want to be? Yes. Am I working at it? Yes. But it doesn't mean I'm going to get it perfect all the time. Because when my kids get up and Liam has to go to school and it's 8:40 and he's not dressed yet and he wants to ride his bike and his lunch isn't made yet, I'm not going to go, hey, Jesus loves you. I'm going, get out the door. Right? I'm scrambling. My first thought isn't Jesus. I kind of wish maybe I was more patient and maybe I did a better timeline about it. But it doesn't mean that when he comes home, I can't go, hey, man, how was school? And you talk about that. But then you sit down and you go, this is what Jesus did today, right? You just bring it into a conversation. And then that measurement, I think, is very worth it because your children are hearing about Jesus. Because what if we started raising our kids to know Jesus and building that firm foundation in their life from an early age, right? The world is full of things you don't want them to know, right? And we don't want them to compare themselves to their friends or compare themselves to influencers online or compare themselves to other families. Maybe they're succeeding in other ways, but you're like, this is where God has called us to be. This is how we're living our life, and you're teaching them that firm foundation. That's the measurement that you guys should be looking at, not the measurement of the world. Because if we're following the measurement of the world, we are failing in all aspects. But if we are following the world, our house is going to be crooked because we don't have a true measuring tape. And like the church, that this isn't something that like you force. Yeah, you might have to make decisions that's going to make you want to teach your kids about Jesus or change how you're going to love your wife like Jesus. It might take more effort to because right, like when you come home from work, like you're tired, and it's sometimes hard to love the way that you feel you should love. But there's grace. Right? Just like the quote, when we become more dependent on God, there's grace. Yeah, we're not going to be perfect until we get to heaven, and so there's just we work on getting there. Each and every day, we do something a little different, and we do something a little different. Jesus shows up in these meaningful ways. I remember when I was younger, and me and my brother shared a room before we moved from Cupar to Regina. We shared a room, and I remember we had two separate beds. And I was sleeping, and I woke up in the middle of the night for some reason. And this was after a day that you know how kids have emotions. Kids are crazy. Some days kids can make you frustrated and angry and all this stuff. My brother had one of those days, and it was just my parents' patience were at a wit's end. And there's like, get to bed, go to bed. We're going to start fresh tomorrow. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. Couldn't see anything. It was pitch black, just a little bit of light from the hallway coming in. And I heard my dad's voice. And he was kneeling beside my brother's bed, and he was praying. I don't think my dad knows that I know this. Right? He wasn't doing it for show, because who's he gonna show it for? Who's he gonna brag it to? Are you really gonna brag to someone that your kid had a meltdown and a horrible day? And then you prayed for him? Like, not many people talk about that. But wow, has that stuck in my head my entire life, that my dad would pray without us knowing. right? If I didn't wake up, I would never know. But that has stuck with me because I know that if he prayed for my brother, my dad was praying for me. And he's praying for my sister. He was building a foundation in our family to be built on Jesus and not the world, because kids are going to have emotions. Wives and husbands are going to have off days, right? I feel like this entire week has been off. But just because my week has been off doesn't mean that God's measurement for us is off. I think we just have to turn to be dependent on his grace and his measurement and not the world's, because I'm going to repeat myself, because once again, if we focus on the world's measurement, we're going to think that we're failing as a dad, failing as a family. And if we're failing, we should just give up. But that's not what Jesus says. And so if I could end with this, and if I could give you some encouragement, is that God's measurement is behind all the things that we do in our lives. Because God's measurement, what if he's asking you to build a wall or build boundaries around people that you shouldn't be around, or building walls and boundaries on things that you shouldn't be doing? What if he's asking you to build a wall against stuff that is taking you away from time with him? And the same could be said, what if on the wall, God is using his measuring tape for pictures of people who need to be in your life? Right? You can use this in all aspects of building a house on what God is asking you to do, but I just get thinking about that. What is God measuring? What is his measurements asking you to do? Because, like I said, a measuring tape makes things straight. And if we're not straight, what do you guys do to make it straight? Well, I mean, you have to take some boards down if you have to. Sometimes there's hammering involved. Sometimes there's cutting involved. Sometimes there's replacing of certain boards. And to be fair, church, it's absolutely, at the time being, it doesn't feel like it's worth it. But to be straightened by the master craftsman is absolutely worth it. And so, Liam, there's a bucket beside you. Can you bring that up to me, please? And so this sermon is not to make you feel awful. This sermon is not to make you feel like you're failing. It's the opposite. I want you guys to be encouraged that you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to be an adult alone. You don't have to be a dad alone. You have a Father in heaven who wants to walk along beside you. You have a church family that wants to walk along beside you. And so Elise and I have purchased, go figure, measuring tape. This one is not going to help you beyond a meter, okay? But I want it to be, whenever you, like, keep it in your car, keep it, I mean, Liam has a backpack. Maybe you have a bag you can clip it onto. Maybe you can put it in a drawer where you're looking often. But may it be a reminder as you open it, as you use a measuring tape, that you go, okay, it's not the world's standards or the measure that I'm looking towards. It's looking towards God's measurement of my life. And God wants to walk along beside me with my life to work with me. And so, Liam, can you go out and hand one to every male in this room? So take it, let it be a reminder. Your measurement is in God and not in this world. I'm going to end with a song, and while the song's going, I'm going to go check on Elisa, and I'll come back up and I'll say grace and everything. But the song is just coming up on the screen. You guys can sit.